For tonight's Green Report, we go to the Great Lakes. In between Lake Huron and Lake Michigan are the Straits of Mackinac. Those straits also separate the lower and upper peninsulas of Michigan. But it's also the site of two aging oil pipelines operated by the Canadian oil company Enbridge, and they were built over half a century ago. Those pipelines were only supposed to last half a century. In 2013, 60 years after the pipelines were built, 10 years after the pipelines were originally supposed to be decommissioned, environmental advocates with the National Wildlife Federation dove into the Straits of Mackinac to investigate the state of the pipelines. According to a team, they found broken structural braces and sections of completely unsupported pipeline. And investigative reporter Spencer Chumbley with Vice's Motherboard found that if just one of the pipelines ruptured, it would spill 1.5 million gallons of oil even with an immediate response, and it would rapidly spread throughout the Great Lakes. Take a look.
This is what an oil spill would look like in the Straits of Mackinac. The colored dots show where the oil would travel within the lake's water tables. Red is near surface, yellow mid-depth, blue near bottom. The oil would travel far, fast, and in different directions.
Already, after 6 days, these surface particles are down, heading into Rogers City, 40 miles away from the Straits.
Though Enbridge denies these claims, the company does have a rather checkered history, with more than 800 spills just between 1999 and 2010 for a total of 6.8 million gallons of spilled oil, including the largest inland oil spill in our nation's history. Here now to discuss the Mackinac pipelines and the potential disaster lurking under the Great Lakes is Spencer Chumbley, investigative journalist and filmmaker. Welcome, Spencer.
Thank you.
Great to have you with us. What brought this to your attention?
I'm from the Midwest. I remember actually swimming in the Straits of Mackinac as a kid, and so after coming off a story about oil by rail, I wanted to look into the Great Lakes and see if there was anything similar like this, oil being transported on Lake Superior or any other lakes in that system.
Is this company the company that owns the pipeline that spilled in the Kalamazoo River?
Yes, so Enbridge really no one knew who Enbridge was before 2010. And so after the spill in the Kalamazoo River in 2010, where they leaked a very large portion of oil from the Alberta tar sands, which sinks and actually is very hard to clean up, I think it was kind of a little bit of a wake-up call to activists and environmental groups in Michigan. And so after that occurred, groups like the National Wildlife Federation kept looking further, and they actually had never really heard of the pipeline beneath the Straits. So that incident, which was the largest inland oil spill in American history, really prompted residents of Michigan to look further and to see what other pipelines they had operating. And they were very surprised to find that there's a 62-year-old pipeline under the Straits of Mackinac, run by the same company who had just dumped all this oil into the Kalamazoo River.
Is that, and in fact, they're still trying to clean up the Kalamazoo River, aren't they?
I mean, they say it's since been cleaned just this past fall that they completed cleanup. I mean, you're talking about a $1.2 billion cleanup effort, which is actually quite a bit of money. In terms of kind of the insurance that the state of Michigan just recently asked Enbridge to have, it's actually quite a drop in the bucket of what they're willing to pay or what they're able to pay to do a cleanup. So
now that spill in the Kalamazoo River was in a pipeline that was carrying tar sands oil, which, as you point out, sinks rather than floats, so it's really, really hard to clean. And it heads right down into the water table below that if given an opportunity. What kind of petroleum is flowing through these pipelines up in the Mackinac Straits, the Straits of Mackinac?
I mean, up until recently, people didn't actually know, and that's really been the kind of the basis of the fight and the argument for some of the activists based in Michigan and the Great Lakes area is the idea that they don't know what's happening. They don't know how the pipeline's supported, they don't know what's traveling through it, and they don't know what kind of preventative measures that Enbridge is actually taking to preserve or repair the pipeline. Enbridge has said that there is not any heavy oil or tar sands crude, as we understand it, to be flowing through those pipelines. And the state of Michigan recently, just in their report that they released in July, asked that there should be a ban on that type of oil traveling through the Straits due to the precarious situation, the depth of the pipelines.
Is this oil coming from Canada to be used in the United States? I mean, where are these pipelines going from and to?
So Line 5 is the one that runs through the Straits. It's one of a large network of pipelines called the Lakehead System, which travels through Canada, from Canada down into South Dakota, into Minnesota, and then kind of hits Superior, Wisconsin, where it breaks off into several different lines. Some of these are now traveling through Wisconsin down eventually to the Gulf of Mexico for export.
Wow.
So realistically, people have been calling not necessarily Line 5, but the Enbridge system, generally in the Midwest area, kind of the Keystone XL that no one knows about.
Right.
While people have been focused on Keystone XL and Obama's approval or disapproval of that, Enbridge has kind of been quietly upgrading in its pipeline capacity in a very, very small capacity. But when you add all those little pieces up, you've got a line like Line 61 traveling through Wisconsin that's pumping 3 times what the Keystone XL was going to carry.
Wow. In the event of a spill, is there a liability cap, or how does Enbridge, what are they going to do?
I mean, the idea, and there's been certain fights, especially in Madison, Wisconsin, they were kind of the last line before this Line 61 was going to expand to carry this much tar sands oil through the state. But if you look at the expenses that Enbridge has incurred from the Kalamazoo spill, a $1.2 billion cleanup, and that's not including, fees or penalties that the federal government has levied against them. They're looking at a $900 million possible maximum cost for a spill in the Straits. Right. I mean, I guess what really comes down to is it's $900 million, but what does that actually cost? They can obviously absorb it, they can pay for that, right. But what is the loss to the Great Lakes ecosystem and the people who are relying on that, including drinking water from 2 countries?
It would be insane. It would be incredibly dramatic. Spencer, thanks so much for the great investigative reporting you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on our program.